Good morning, everybody. Time's 10:59. We'll just give it a few more minutes, allow a few more people to join, and we'll get started just after 11 o'clock. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's just turned 11 o'clock. We'll just hang on a couple more minutes, a few more people just joining. So we'll give them time to get in, and we'll start very shortly. Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this morning. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for the first webinar in this Azure123 series for education. Let's take a quick look at our agenda today now. Before we go any further, let's look at a few numbers. In 2020, 1 million devices are expected to come online every hour. In education, when we look at attracting students, certainly international students, using digital is necessary to meet student expectations. Top tier candidates, particularly within IT, science or mathematics, want to enroll in innovative academic programs that demonstrate commitment to forward thinking. By having a strong digital innovation program in place, you can show this commitment. People understand that having the newest, latest and best often comes at a cost. When they buy the latest model of the iPhone, they know they'll have to pay for that experience. When you incorporate digital innovation into everyday processes, prospective and existing students will take notice. They'll think they're getting more value, even if the implementation requires little effort behind the scenes. I'll stop for 2 seconds. I think we've got a few people having audio problems. Checking you can hear me now. Hopefully you can. 60% of computing will be done in the cloud by 2025. That sounds a lot, right? But that still leaves 40% of computing on premises. So whilst mobile is a catalyst for digital transformation, Cloud is an enabler for this. It's important to be able to choose where we host our applications. Right, I'll see you can hear me now. Perfect. Sometimes there'll be a reason that dictates an application is best hosted on premises. But if we make that choice, we need to be able to manage the application infrastructure efficiently, and the cloud can help us here too. With this in mind, it's important to think about how we can make sure that our platforms can support digital transformation, keep pace with the ambition of our businesses. As I'm sure you're all experiencing in your day to day, we are all being asked to support more with less. That maybe more data storage for student data, more compute resources to render 3D graphics for design students. Also, as vendors release updates to their applications, we are often asked to provide extra resources to host test environments. Sometimes simply to meet the needs of the update, we have to get more servers and more compute resource. Our faculty is often looking to deliver innovation through technology, and this all places a strain on our infrastructure. We have to store more data, find spare compute resources, ensure we have backup capacity and DR for the systems we build, and often we're expected to be able to do this with limited budget. At the same time, we are also expected to respond quickly to the requirements being placed on us. Again, this is where we really see the cloud can help you get the computing power of enterprise whilst meeting tight budgets. From our point of view, Azure VMs are ideal for education establishments. They allow you to grow without expanding your physical presence or equipment capital costs. VMs are built by the minute, so you only pay for what you use. And Microsoft has made some great strides in making the automation of virtual machines runtime as easy as possible. You can configure that now from the portal or using automation scripts if you want to start up and shut down big environments on a schedule. A lot of work's also been done around giving you visibility into the cost of running your Azure VMs. You can see now on the Azure VM Blade, you've got cost options there that you can jump in and see how much you're spending. So using Azure virtual machines, you can configure your application workloads to account for seasonal usage. So you don't pay all year round based on peak demand. When usage declines in summer months, you can scale down the compute resources accordingly. Virtual machines you build can be Windows or Linux as well, and we'll look at a bit more detail around that later on. Again, you don't have to deploy everything in the cloud. Creating a hybrid model and using the cloud appropriately means you don't discard your existing investments in hardware. Most educational institutions we work with today do adopt a hybrid model, whereby they opt to retain some workloads on premises. So systems like Blackboard, we've seen people retain premise and often protect those up to the cloud for the purposes of DR or backup. So we've worked quite extensively with Lincoln University in that space. So they protect a lot of their on-premises assets, which run locally on Hyper-V still. So they have things like Blackboard running locally within the university, and we protect those with Azure Site Recovery. And we can automate the failover. So should they have an outage around that system, we can fail it over to Azure in a matter of minutes. And we will start looking at that in more detail on other webinars and perhaps touch on it a little later on today too. So regardless of our budget, we all want to make sure we get the most out of our investments in hardware. And we spoke about that hybrid environment allowing you to do that. And again, whether you're trying to protect an investment in servers themselves, or perhaps a storage infrastructure that underpins those virtual environments, and I can certainly talk from experience here, there does become a time when the cost of ensuring these platforms have the appropriate level of support in place, maintaining them daily, you start to see disk failures, that kind of thing. Eventually starts to become more expensive to maintain and support those systems than starting to look at alternates. So when you do have to bite the bullet and replace those hardware platforms, I would really urge you to explore how the cloud might be able to help with that. If you are using Azure already, I know a few of you are on the call today, and you have a site-to-site VPN or express route in place, then you really can treat Azure virtual machines as an extension of your data center. With just a few clicks, you can provision a virtual machine from within the Azure portal. And again, that could be either using Windows or Linux. If you need to repeat that deployment, there are tools there available for you to do that today. We can use it infrastructure as a code approaches using resource manager templates, Azure DevOps build pipelines. We can get to those quite easily. We can see when we provision something in the portal now, we can see the code behind that build. And of course, Microsoft Azure integrates with all the open source tools like Terraform, Chef, and Puppet that we use to orchestrate larger environments today. As I'm sure many of you will know, extended support for Windows Server 2008 and Windows Server 2008 R2 ends January the 14th, 2020, which I know seems like a long time off yet, but I'm sure you find, much like me, that the days and weeks whiz past, so that'll be here before we know it. And when this extended support period does end, Microsoft will no longer release security updates. So we've seen that with Windows Server 2003 a few years ago, and now that's coming to 2008 too. So once that happens, you may be exposed to security attacks. Quite often you fall out of compliance with some internal or industry regulations, especially if you're accredited to hold personal data, that kind of stuff. Important to stay in compliance there. So whilst end of support is an ideal time to start looking at how you could transform your IT estate and get some of that stuff up into the cloud, Microsoft and ourselves are realistic here. It can be hard to do all of that before an end of support timeline. We're under pressure to do our day-to-day jobs without extra work on it. So to address this need, Microsoft are providing extended security updates for free in Azure for 2008 and 2008 R2 versions of Windows Server and SQL Server. So you can rehost these workloads into Azure. You don't have to change how the application code works. And certainly here at Sol-Tec, we can help you with that. We can rehost applications quite easily to Azure. We'll talk about that a little later on too. But this extended support period does give you the opportunity to plan your future path a little bit more carefully, perhaps. So rather than being forced into something because of end of life, you can move that into Azure and take the time that you need to re-architect your applications, perhaps, and make them cloud first, or simply just get ready to upgrade the OS and SQL versions. If you do decide to do that, there's no cost for those updates, so you simply pay for the Azure virtual machine running costs, and the ongoing security updates will be free. I think that's a good option. Again, we see today, and particularly pertinent, I think, in the education sector, is that people want to remain productive regardless of where they are working from. So this really means we need to deliver some innovative solutions to address the common challenges people face when working from remote locations. Sometimes that's compounded if they're using their own equipment that perhaps doesn't have the same specification, even the same operating system as the ones within our campuses. So running remote desktop services in Azure is a good option here. And we've done that at scale for people, and it allows you to run applications and desktops in the cloud, essentially. Again, this can help you reduce costs by consolidating your infrastructure and again, your management piece around that infrastructure, so you don't have to manage a bunch of desktops and keep those maintained and up to date. You can simply use thin clients or lower spec PCs, Chromebooks, things like that. So remote desktop services, again, can help you enhance your security there as well by ensuring your data is not stored on those local devices. And it can really help you give students and faculty access to their applications and data from any device on campus. So it doesn't matter whether they're in a library, in a lab, they can access the same consistent experience and access their files, their data, their apps. And I did want to share something today. I don't have a huge amount of technical detail about this yet, but I'm sure we'll start to see that released over time. But you may well have noticed yourself that Microsoft have announced an upcoming Windows Virtual Desktop, which, as far as I understand today, when it is available, will allow you to virtualize both Windows 7 and Windows 10 desktops. And you'll be able to do that without needing to host, configure, set up, install, and manage components that are typically associated with a remote desktop environment. So things like diagnostics, networking, connections, brokering, gateways, all of that's going to be taken care of by the underlying service. So almost becoming a desktop as a service offering. And as I understand it as well, much like the Windows Server 2008 R2, our current belief is for extended support for Windows 7 desktops will be coming in as your virtual desktop, so you'll be entitled to free security updates there as well. And as I said, I'm sure there'll be some more announcements about this soon. In fact, actually, just yesterday I noticed that Microsoft has acquired FS Logic. So I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with their products, but they traditionally helped optimize the user experience when working with Exchange Online. So Office 365 Exchange, or perhaps any other hosted Exchange you might be using. If you've ever worked in a remote desktop environment, you'll know that dealing with the Outlook profile and cached email was potentially complex. So I know Microsoft are working to make that seamless and give you performance that's perhaps better than something you could do on desktop. So if virtual desktops is something you may be interested in, I'd say keep an eye on that space. I've put some links at the end of the slide deck that we'll give out to you as well, so you can follow those announcements. And I'm sure Microsoft account team will be able to help you answer any questions you may have there too. Again, could be a good option if you're running a lot of Windows 7 now. Perhaps move some of that into the cloud and carry on using that whilst you're rolling out Windows 10 elsewhere. So other things, other reasons why you might consider the cloud, or what you might consider the cloud for. Talk specifics about Azure a bit later on, but backup. So I don't know what your environments are like, but I can certainly say most of our customers are experiencing sort of the last couple of years unprecedented data growth. And certainly speaking to your peers in the education sector, generally speaking, you seem to collect data and continue to do so at staggering rates. So you've got student information, research data, a couple of examples of that, and I'm sure you've got your own. A lot of this content as well is becoming richer. So we've got larger data sets to deal with in the first instance. So people are creating more media, more video, bigger file sets. So we have to protect and back up all that data. We normally have some policies again about how long we need to keep that for. So much like the earlier slides, that places quite a strain on our backup infrastructure. So cloud backup offers unlimited scalability. So even if you're not using the cloud to host servers, if you've got no network connectivity to the cloud, you can use a cloud-based backup as a viable replacement for tape, which is still quite commonly used today. We still speak to many people that are swapping tapes, upgrading tape capacities, replacing their LTO systems. So if you ever had to manage tape at scale, and stick my hand up there and say there was a time when I used to, it's hard to manage. It uses up a lot of time. It can be error prone. But there are some great Azure first party solutions, Azure backups out there that backs up over the internet for you. Data's encrypted in transit, it's encrypted at rest. You create your own encryption keys, so it's very secure, which can help you replace that tape. You can retain your data for 99 years, so plenty long enough. And there are third-party solutions, so solutions like Rubrik that have taken a completely different approach to cloud-based backup, and they've been architected and designed really with cloud in mind. So these backup solutions aren't just using the cloud as a sort of bolt-on storage bucket, but they are actually looking at cloud as being a first-party part of that solution. So they deal with data compression. They talk about fast resource times. They address that challenge that's typically been there with data backup. I'd urge you to look at that if you're not doing so already. Again, sticking on this theme, and we are going to be talking about it a lot more in a separate webinar, so I won't dwell on this too much. But again, I'm sure we've all experienced the pain of systems going offline. So students can't swipe cards for meals, staff members can't find files, no one can access the online portals you need, and chaos soon starts. So when this downtime does occur, you need a plan to get your systems running again. Azure Site Recovery allows you to automate your protection and recovery processes and orchestrate recovery. So the ability to actually test your DR becomes a reality. So we've often seen that DR is something a lot of people talk about, but actually can rarely test because they're quite often too scared to initiate a failover because they're not convinced that they'll be able to fail back, and what's going to happen to the data and what happens if people start writing to places. So things like that need to be addressed. So Azure Site Recovery is something that allows us to do that. and you can protect all your major workloads. It doesn't have to be just your critical ones, and eliminate that secondary data center. So rather than having a separate building or area across your campus, you can actually start to use Azure as your data center. Again, if you've moved machines into Azure already, you can protect these to other Azure regions as well. So you can have orchestrated failover for Azure VMs too. So again, site recovery is a great option for you. And I've just seen a couple of questions pop up in the Q&A window. Just to let you know, I'm not ignoring them. I think we had a bit of a problem with the sound at the start. So in case you didn't catch the bit as the agenda slide was up, just to let you know, I'll cover off the Q&A stuff at the end rather than try as we go. But there will be time for questions, and obviously encourage you to participate and ask what you need to. Again, at the end of the slide, I'll share contact details and things so you can email me directly as well if you have questions that you don't think of session today. Just moving on. There are many reasons, again, that you might want to use a cloud. I'm not going to dwell on this too much because there are reasons that will be unique to all of you. We'll cover a few of those again, how we can get started later on as well. But just to say, really, if you are doing any kind of research in Azure, then do get in touch with us at the end of the session. We have a self-service solution that we've been building out with Nottingham Trent University that allows researchers to research quicker, in essence, by allowing them to build their own Azure environments without involving IT. So it gets them up and running quicker. I won't go into too much detail about how that works, but we provide templates, ensure that the build that the research teams are doing adheres to your corporate standards for things like backup, DR, that kind of stuff. But the same portal that allows researchers to provision Azure services with a few clicks and see how much they're spending and automate their startup, shutdown, that kind of stuff can apply to any Azure infrastructure. So if you are resource constrained and are looking at building Azure and want to retain that in premises or give users power to build their own infrastructure whilst making sure they're doing it in a way that you want them to, then have a chat to us as well. We can talk about how to do that. It's quite a good solution that's starting to be built out there for you. Okay, so before we talk a little bit more about why we believe Azure is the best option for education, I wanted to make sure you're all aware of the Azure for Students offer. So this is an offer that Microsoft have in place that allows students to get started with some free Azure credits. So it gives them access to free services, and they can do that without having to put a credit card in at sign up. So quite often, if you're a normal customer and you need to do buy some Azure credit on pay as you go, you need to type your credit card number. Obviously, not everyone's comfortable with that or has a credit card to do so, just to have that sort of hanging over them. So I've popped a URL on the screen. Again, we will send out the materials afterwards, so you should be able to get hold of those. So don't worry about copying the URL down too much now. But yeah, it's worth taking a look and seeing if that's something that you can use yourselves. And apologies again, the sound. We do seem to be having some sound issues today. I'm not sure why that is. So if you can't hear me, I do apologise. Okay, let's take a look at why we feel Microsoft Azure is the best cloud for education. And we'll start off with a quick look at what we've branded on the slide there, flexibility. So there is still this misconception that Azure doesn't support open source. And in truth, I spend a lot of time talking to people about this, but nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, 1 in 4 Azure virtual machines are actually running Linux. So if you are running open source, you can bring the tools and user skills you've already developed over many years, I'm sure, and run virtually any application that uses open source operating system of your choice. And we have customers running CentOS, Oracle, Ubuntu, Red Hat, name it, they're probably running it. So again, Azure lets your researchers run open source tools and their open source toolkits too. So OpenJDK, Python, Node.js, and others. So what we're really trying to say here is with Azure, you won't be forced to choose between open source and Windows, or having to migrate from one platform to another. You'll find that you could be able to run your workloads in Azure. Again, you're not forced to choose where you house your data or your operations. So again, whether that's internally or whether you're moving it to the cloud, Azure does have that hybrid capability there, which really helps you maximize that investment you've already made in technology. Simply, and we'll look at this later, extending your network into Azure, whether you're doing that over Jisk, with what we'd call ExpressRoute, or whether you're doing that site-to-site VPN. As soon as you've done that, you can really start building out this hybrid environment. So things like Azure Stack, certainly not something you get for £100 a month, but again, it would help you build out that true hybrid picture as well. So if we look a little bit at pricing and scalability now, obviously everyone has a different budget. People's priorities lie in different areas when it comes to their IT spend. However, Azure does help you reduce the overhead costs associated with data storage, server maintenance, and networking. It's helping you save some of that operational budget, which is often squeezed in education and the public sector in general. So having the ability to take up pay-as-you-go pricing, meaning that you only pay for what you use, is very helpful. Obviously, that goes to goes as far as being able to scale machines based on demand. So even if you're not looking at solutions that auto scale, there's many examples where machines don't need to be running at full tilt during the summer months. So we can quite simply downsize those servers during those periods and spin them up. We did touch on it earlier, but we can use automation to turn machines off at night when they're not used, if they don't need to be available 24/7 to students and faculty. So the back office systems that are perhaps only are used during term times are great for that. You can save significant amounts by moving those to the cloud, turning them off and turning them on for perhaps just 8 or 12 hours a day, not at weekends, not at night, perhaps not over the summer period where the students aren't at university or school or college. So that really helps us too, and we can help show you how to build out Azure automation to do that for you, how to get involved in doing it yourself. Again, we talk about protection and security, so really important. Obviously, you want to make sure that anything we do is compliant, meets security requirements. So Azure's compliance coverage is more comprehensive than any other cloud provider. So it meets a range of international and industry-specific standards like ISO 27001. And security and privacy are really built into the core of everything that Microsoft do in the Azure platform. There is a Azure Security Center there as well, so you can get complete visibility and control over security threats. So that's great piece of software that you can use to really help you understand your security posture across both on-premise and the cloud. And we all know, and I'm sure you all do on the call know, that Azure uses industry standard protocols to encrypt our data when it's in transit to the data center. So services like backup, there's encryption across all of those. And again, when our data's at rest within our storage accounts or machines in Azure, that's secured too. The one thing that's often overlooked here is that you can use Azure's compliance and security capabilities to your advantage. So an example of this would be that Sol-Tec helped Leicester University build an ISO 27001 accredited environment that allowed them to bid for research projects that dictated that the data associated with those projects was stored in a compliant environment. So through a bunch of scripts, we allowed their IT team to build an entire Azure environment that covered off many parts of what you need to do research. So it had remote desktops in it. It had various other services, and it ensured that access was controlled and secured and protected whilst allowing the researchers to do their jobs. I want to whip fast the next couple of slides, so I just want to get on to actually talking about what you can get in Azure for £100. I know that was the topic of the webinar, so we want to make sure we spend some time on that with you, talking some practical use cases. I was going to show a couple of slides here, but just give you some idea of the scale and investment Microsoft has made in cloud. So it may not seem relevant to you that Microsoft is the first cloud provider to put data centers in South Africa, but the approach Microsoft have of ensuring that you've got ability to store data in the right region and close to potential students and students that you have today and faculty. So if you're looking to run an online learning course for overseas students, you can distribute that application appropriately, making sure there's local access to it, so they've got fast access to data stuff. We have a customer delivering over 13 million hours of remote learning to 800,000 online candidates out of Azure, so that's possible. Azure Security Center, again, we did touch on this earlier. So as we adopt and build our hybrid environments, we need to be sure that we have a good security posture across those. So Azure Security Center does give you that unified view, security across all your on-premise assets and cloud workloads. Helps you continuously monitor the security of those machines and the networks. Also building assessments into there. So for very small sums of money, you can get started there, capture some data, do some analysis of your AD against best practices, for example. But let's, what we're really saying here as we wrap this section up before we move on to talk about what we can get for £100 is that there are few, if any, technical reasons that applications can't be run in the cloud. So as you were seen earlier, we can cover Windows and open source workloads as they're both supported. There are virtual machine sizes ranging from small general purpose instances with 1 CPU and 1 gig of memory to much larger machines with 16 CPUs and 200 plus gig of memory. There's pretty much everything you can think of in between as well. You don't get those large machines for £100 a month, but you do get quite a bit, and we'll talk about that in a second. There are migration tools provided as well by Microsoft and third parties to help you move on-premises systems to Azure. So Azure Site Recovery, part of Azure Migrate, is free for 30 days. So if you need to shift a workload into the cloud, there's that with Azure Site Recovery. Here at Sol-Tec, we have some great experience and established patterns to help you move really complex workloads into the cloud. So we can do things like agentless migrations without having hypervisor access. So if you've got something in a third-party data center you want to move, we can help you migrate it to Azure with minimal or no disruption to your users. So let's look at what we can get for £100 a month with through the introduction to Azure there. For those of you who aren't using it, hopefully that's been helpful. For those of you that are, I'm sure you knew a lot of that already, but it's always good to quickly update that and put some context on this. So got a few practical use cases really of what you can do in Azure, whether you're at the start of your journey, whether you're already using Azure, here's some things you can do to get going. So extending Windows Active Directory to Azure. So if you've only got one location with domain controllers and you've ever had to restore Active Directory because of a hardware failure or something like that, it can be quite time consuming and complex. So it's always a good idea to have a domain controller in a secondary location. So if you make that Azure, you need to site-to-site VPN, some domain controllers. Ideally, you'd put 2 domain controllers in an availability set to make sure they're highly available in Azure. But if you're using them from DR, perhaps you don't need to do that. But if we were to look at putting 2 virtual machines in Azure with additional 64 gig disks attached to them for the Active Directory database, plus the basic site-to-site VPN, and looked at pay-as-you-go pricing, that would cost you something in the region of £85 a month. Likewise, you won't get this for £85 a month, but if you're doing anything with ADFS, then moving ADFS into Azure makes it highly available, removes that dependency on your on-premises infrastructure for ADFS being available. So if you're using 365, moving ADFS, AD Connect, kind of thing into Azure is done. You won't get all of that for £100 a month, but it's somewhere probably in the region of double that. Get you going with ADFS. Moving a line of business application into Azure. So quite often budgets are squeezed. We don't have the luxury of being able to create dev test environments for critical applications. It's always good to have a dev test environment if you can, but trying to maintain that on premises isn't necessarily sensible. So if we looked at a line of business application and said, let's do dev test for it, if you were to take advantage of the Azure DevTest Offer, and there's a URL on that earlier, that means you wouldn't pay for any Windows operating system or SQL licensing for these dev test instances. So something like a 2 CPU server with 8 gig of RAM running SQL Server Enterprise, perhaps with 3 additional 128 gig SSD disks attached, would cost around £97 per month under that dev test offer. Dev test machines generally don't need to be such a high spec as our prod ones. We can turn those machines off as well. So I've assumed there that you run your dev test environment every day. Now, in reality, we know that's not true. So if we ran it for 8 hours a day, you could save 2/3 off that cost too. So using the dev test offer, building our dev test environment is a good thing to do in Azure. So Azure File Sync, I don't know if you've come across Azure File Sync before. It's a fairly new service based around Azure Files. But essentially, Azure File Sync replicates files from your on-premises Windows server to an Azure file share. So with Azure File Sync, you don't have to choose between if you put all your data in the cloud and deal with some of the challenges around networking that perhaps go with that. The benefits of having close access to an on-premises file server, so you get both. So essentially, we use File Sync to centralize file services in Azure whilst giving us local access to data. So essentially, we're replicating files from our on-premises Windows server into Azure. And if you think about pretty much just how you may have used DFS or DFSR to replicate data between Windows servers, we're almost doing a similar thing with a namespace and replicating that to the cloud. So what that does is it means we have our hot data locally on our file servers, so we can access that at the speed we need to. If we've got campuses or remote offices dotted around geographic locations, we can make sure that the right files are close to the user, and then the rest of the files sit in the cloud. You still have access to them, but they get pulled down when you need to get them. So again, once you've got that data in the cloud, you've got some great DR scenarios available to you, so you can nearly instantly recover from the loss of a file server. Let's say the RAID array fails on one of those local servers. As you've got that fully resilient copy of all the data in Azure, you simply build a replacement Windows file server, install the sync tool, connect it up to the sync group, and then the namespace is synced, downloaded, and you're ready to go. So in terms of cost, 1 terabyte of locally redundant storage, so that would be 3 copies of those files in one Azure data center with 1 file sync server, so that's just including 1 file sync local server, cost in the region of £45 a month. You can add additional file sync servers, so for your other remote locations, it costs you an extra £3.73 per month onto that. And you might decide that if this is production data, you want to change that from locally redundant to geo-redundant, and that would be our recommendation, which would give you 3 copies of the data in one Azure data center, 1 region, and another 3 copies asynchronously maintained in a secondary region. So think, I don't know, North Europe and West Europe, or South and West UK. And to add that geo-redundant capability on would bring the cost up for that 1 terabyte of file sync to £91 a month. This one's a bit of a stretch for £100, so it's in here just so that it's not forgotten, and the opportunity cost is significantly more in terms of what you could lose in terms of opportunity if something isn't done about end of life. But I won't dwell on that. We spoke about it earlier. You're not going to get all of that done for necessarily £100, but if you've got a couple of Windows Server 2008 instances that are fairly small sized VMs, and think here that perhaps you just need to archive those servers. You've upgraded them, but you want to keep the old version for a period of time when you could use ASR free for 30 days, replicate that server into the cloud, shut it down, and just pay for storage at which point. If you wanted to leave it up and get updates from it, obviously you'll be paying based on the size of the VMs that you're. That could be realistic, but perhaps not so. Again, we're covering Azure backup in much more detail next week in the next webinar, but you could protect some on-premise assets to Azure. So if you think about your local file server, perhaps you don't want to do file sync on it, you just want a backup of it. It could be someone really important within your faculty has a laptop that needs to be backed up, but we can back up a file server or any Windows device, Windows 10 laptop with 2 terabytes of data. We could keep 30 daily backups, 6 weekly backups, 12 monthly backups, 12 yearly backups, and that would have cost us around £35 a month for the first year. Then obviously after the first year, we're keeping a yearly backup, so it would go up a bit then, and sit somewhere probably around about between 90 and £100 a month to have that retention period. But again, that would obviously depend if you needed to keep 12 yearly backups. As you start scaling those retention policies, that will become cheaper. Azure Site Recovery, stealing my thunder from next week. I don't know if it'll be me on the webinar next week, but we are covering this in a lot more depth. But to give you an example of what you could do for £100, protecting perhaps an on-premise web server with an SQL database backend, costing the region of £38 a month. So sort of £19 per instance. If you fail that over to Azure, start using the VMs live, then obviously there'd be a cost to running those VMs, but you can get the peace of mind of protecting your on-premise assets into Azure for less than £50 a month there. So yeah, that's something that I'd urge you to do. You do need site-to-site VPN in place, so you could probably add on perhaps £20 to that for the site-to-site VPN, but again, less than £100. So Azure Monitor. So Azure Monitor collects data from both cloud and on-premises environments. So it helps you understand how your applications are performing and helps you identify issues affecting them and the resources they depend on. So if you remember, or if you've ever heard of Azure Log Analytics and Application Insights, well, they've been combined now, consolidated, if you like, into Azure Monitor, which gives you that single integrated experience for monitoring Azure and on-prem. You're paying for that per gigabyte, so it all really depends on the amount of data you ingest into the service, rather than previously in its old incarnation it was done on the number of nodes. So obviously you could have monitored 100 nodes and ingested very little data because the only thing you care about perhaps is monitoring 1 or 2 services on there, which would have cost you previously quite a reasonable amount of money, certainly more than £100. But now we're talking about ingesting data per gig across as many nodes as we like. So we could have 10,000 nodes as long as we only ingest a small amount of data from there. We're talking of a relatively small number in terms of cost. So something in the region of 10 servers ingesting about 2 or 3 gig of data from those 10 servers, monitoring probably about 10 Windows services and things like disk space, stuff like that, cost you around about £85 to £95 a month. And again, the Azure pricing calculator can help you with some of this pricing. Again, so can Sol-Tec. So if you've got questions around how much some of this stuff costs, and we'll get a detailed sort of quote for your environment, then please just reach out to us and we can help you with that. So hosting web apps in Azure, so web apps that use .NET, Java, Node.js, Python. Azure provides you with a fully managed platform with global scale to allow you to host those. So you can leverage any existing tools you have to create and deploy those applications and do it without the hassle of managing infrastructure. So you can get started and actually try that for free. There's a free DevTest Azure web hosting plan. And if you want to move that into a production plan, I think the smallest production plan that allows things like custom domain names, auto scaling, backup, deployment slots starts at around £55 per month. We have one customer, for example, and we'll talk about the example on the next slide, or this one is very similar really. So you could host a WordPress site in Azure. So again, that can be done on a not quite free tier because you do need a database server. but you can certainly get started for less than £100 a month. The Sol-Tec website that we use, our corporate website, is hosted on WordPress in Azure, and that is backed up daily. We have deployment slots, so we can switch from staging to live, and that costs about £112 per month, so slightly over £100. But you could get started there. So depending on what you want to do, we have some customers, for example, with Azure web app, and it could be on WordPress or it could just be a .NET web page, that provide a infrastructure status page for across their campus of things, where there may be an issue with something, so traffic light system around IT. And they host that in Azure, so obviously if there is a problem with their on-premise infrastructure, the web page is still available, assuming that infrastructure isn't their network. So there's 9 examples there, really, of things you can do for under £100. In reality, there are lots and lots of things you could do, but are they practical? You can host a couple of CDNs, you could do millions of DNS queries, you could have some Azure DNS hosting. There's lots and lots you could do, but I thought I'd try and give you sort of 9 examples there of things that we actually see people doing, that we can say anecdotally cost less than £100 from what we've seen. So just going to move on to the Q&A now. So we've got some questions. I'll have to scroll back. Firstly, apologies to anybody who struggled with sound. We've been doing some testing with Azure, with Teams and Teams live events. It's been fine before, so do apologise that you had some outages at the start. Perhaps some choppy sound halfway through. So would you have an on-premises solution for media such as video? If so, how easy is it to have on-prem servers linked into an Azure domain? So there are some cloud-based media solutions that sit in the Azure space. Nothing really that I would say is an on-premise solution for video. There are things in Office 365 as well. So if you're doing internal video, there's Stream. In Office 365, there's Azure Media Services kind of stuff. Obviously, that's available to you, but that's not really so much of an on-premise solution today. In terms of linking to an Azure domain, obviously we use Azure AD as the authentication source for your Azure account, and then after that, it would be however you manage your media service. So not a great answer there, but again, if you want to expand a little bit more on what you're trying to achieve, perhaps not in a Q&A window if it's not comfortable for you to do it there, but either via your Microsoft account team or come directly to myself, we can talk to you about how perhaps you could achieve what you're trying to do. Cover some of them. What do you get for £100 a month? So we've covered some of those. Again, if you've got a particular use case in mind and you're thinking, well, what's this going to cost me? I know the Azure pricing calculator is a great tool, but you need to know what you're looking at to get a realistic price out. Again, either reach out to your Microsoft account team or to us here at Sol-Tec, and we can help you with that pricing. If our WAN has on-net, would that work, or do you need site-to-site VPN? I'll be honest, I'm not sure what on-net is in that context. So you need essentially site-to-site VPN to Azure. There's a connection out from JISC to what we'd call ExpressRoute, but that gives you a private connection to the Azure data center. I can check for you if on-net does work and gives you access into the Microsoft backbone. So essentially what you're doing with things like ExpressRoute is you can almost consider Azure as another point on your MPLS network. So unlike a site-to-site VPN, which is connecting you into a specific data center, the JISC offerings around Azure give you access to Azure as though it's another data center, basically. So you have low latency, high speed connections. But I'll confirm with you around on-net and let you know what's there. So I think that covers the Q&A. I don't know if anybody else has got any other questions that they'd like to ask in the Q&A window now, so we'll leave that going for a few minutes. I will just move on to the next slide for you. Just again, you'll get a recording of this session, and we can also share with you the slides. But I've got some useful resources for you here that may may not help you, but things we've talked about on the call today. So access to the end of support offer, learn a bit about hybrid benefits and how that can help you. Give you a link there to the Microsoft Learn site. There's some great Azure skill learning slides there, and content, on-demand labs, that kind of stuff you can do. So please do read through those. Browse. There might be some stuff that's of use to you there. Hopefully you'll find some content of interest. And of course, needless to say, anything that's come up today, please do get in touch with anything that may have piqued an interest to you, giving you an idea of how perhaps you can spend some of your Azure credits if you've invested already. If not, and you're looking to invest, how best and perhaps to get started on your journey with cloud. In the next webinars, we'll be covering data protection, disaster recovery in more depth. So we'll go into some actual demos for you in that one. I didn't demo building anything for £100. It seems a little bit unnecessary, but we will look at Azure backup and site recovery, and we'll give you some demos and some resources to show you how we can fail over and orchestrate failover there. And we've got some case studies in that space we can share with you too, for educational institutions. And on the third webinar, we'll look at Azure web app. We'll run for a demo of spinning up a website or a WordPress site, show you how easy it is to get that up and running, some guidance there on how you can move data into something like that. So the first session, or the next one, is next Thursday, so the 29th, and the one after the 6th of December. So unless there's any further questions popping up in the Q&A window, and I haven't seen any, then I think we'll wrap up there. So all that's left to say from my side is thank you very much again for attending today. Apologies again for any sound issues you experienced, and if you do need to reach out to us, there's contact details on the slide that's on the screen now. My email address I will send out with the marketing team will send out with the video links and the slide decks afterwards. So thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate the time. I know you're all busy, so it is appreciated. And if you want to talk about anything around Azure, please, as I said, do get in touch. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Good day.